Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Keel. I'm the General Manager for Bloomberg Green, and I'm excited to join you for a conversation on how companies are setting and achieving their corporate climate commitments. I have a fantastic group with me today. I've got Edgar Blanco, who is the Director of Net Zero Product, Technology, and Science for Amazon, Ellen Jakowski, who's the Chief Sustainability and Social Impact Officer for HP, Richard Batten is the Global Chief Sustainability Officer for JLL, and Jonathan Cole, who's the Managing Director of Iberdrola Renewables Offshore Wind Division. We know that making major climate commitments takes a ton of work, especially for the size and scale of the companies that are with me today. So we're going to talk about that whole process, the evaluation that's needed, the buy-in that's needed, the challenges that can be overcome. So I've asked each of our four panelists to select a corporate climate commitment, something that their organization has done. They're going to share that climate commitment with you to start, and then we're going to unpack it, looking at things like why did they select that commitment? What is collaboration, or what input has it taken to build that commitment out? How do you scale a solution like this? What barriers pop up along the way? And then how do we really track and measure the outcome of these commitments? So first, let's go around and share what we'll be talking about. Edgar, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about Amazon's climate commitment.
Well, thanks for an invitation to share this important topic. Again, we in Amazon, we really all know that the scientists have told us we have a limited time window to make the change we need to achieve and stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050. So we actually work backwards from that science. And in September 19, we joined Global Optimisms and co-founded and became the first signatory of the Climate Pledge. That is kind of our main commitment on this topic. And the pledge is three pieces of commitments. One, make sure we measure and report the greenhouse gases, that we actually implement decarbonization, that are in line with the Paris agreements, but we are also committed to achieve net zero carbons by 2040, so 10 years earlier than the Paris agreements. In addition to that climate pledge commitment, that really is the one we started working backwards from, we also have announced that we're going to be achieving 100% renewable energy in our operations by 2025. And we have also committed to have 50% of all of our shipments to customers to be net zero carbon by 2030. So those are kind of, in a nutshell, our three commitments: net zero carbon by 2040, 100% renewable energy by 2025, and 50% of our shipments to customers to be net zero carbon by 2030, all of it working backwards from the Paris Agreement 10 years earlier.
Great. We'll dig into all of these, but really interesting, different scopes, different timelines of these commitments, different people it's engaging with. So we'll come back to all of those. But Ellen, let's go to you. Tell us about HP's commitment.
Sure. Well, for years, obviously, we've recognized that climate change is coming and we need to take responsibility and action in this space. We were the first in our industry to publish our comprehensive carbon footprint, as well as set comprehensive carbon reduction goals. And our commitment to taking action in this space only continues to strengthen. Obviously, one of our most significant businesses, though, is making and selling printers, which, of course, uses paper. And that inextricably ties us to the importance of forests. So one of our pledges is to make every page printed forest positive, carbon neutral, and part of a circular economy. A couple years ago, we set a goal to achieve zero deforestation associated with HP brand paper and our paper-based product packaging by 2020. And we reached the goal of 100% zero deforestation with our HP branded paper 2 years ahead of schedule. And we are above 90% in achieving our zero deforestation goal for the paper-based product packaging. And this is really all about what we call our HP Forest Positive Printing Framework. And the concept there is to go beyond our own footprint and to help really shift the whole industry here and go beyond what our existing sustainable fiber sourcing programs are for our company. It includes partnerships with NGOs like WWF and Arbor Day, and it's really targeted on protecting forests, improving responsible forest management, and also helping develop science-based targets. So a lot of work to do in this space, but we've already made some significant contributions, but clearly more to do.
Great. Richard, let's go to you because I know you're also thinking about science-based targets in your goal. So tell us about what JLL is working on.
That's right. So JLL is a real estate service company, and we have based our commitments around SBTI. So we are really focused on our 1.5 degree commitment by 2034, which is a scope 1 and 2 reduction of 70% by then. No offsets included in that, and a 54% reduction in our scope 3 by 2034. On top of that, and it's quite an easy one for us to do, is then to do a net zero carbon buildings commitment by 2030 with the World Green Building Council. That's quite straightforward for us. Scopes 1 and 2 are sort of manageable. Our big issue is that we manage, on behalf of our clients, real estate that is 1,500 times the square footage that we ourselves occupy. So our big issue looking forward is around the scope 3 emissions. Our internal emissions, scope 3 emissions, air travel, etc., we can manage that. The big issue is 95% of our footprint is our client scope 2 emissions that are our scope 3. And that's the piece that we're working on at the moment.
And then finally, Jonathan, I know for Iberdrola, this is a bit of a different conversation because it's not that you're making a commitment so much as you're radically changing what your business has been and building a different type of business for the future. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, to be honest, we've actually been living and breathing with a climate commitment for the past 20 years because, you know, that's how long in Iberdrola we've been working on the energy transition. So about 20 years ago, we started the process of changing our business, which was a small Spanish utility, you know, mostly making its revenues in thermal power in Spain, into what today is a global renewable energy powerhouse. You know, in that time, we have completely changed the business to be, you know, one which is taking about 80% of its cash flows from renewable energy and from transmitting and distributing that renewable energy to market. And, you know, over that period, we've actually multiplied the size of our business by about 6. So, you know, market cap, our profitability, our earnings per share, all of those metrics have gone up by a factor of about 6, while taking about 75% out of our carbon emissions. So we've shown, you know, that when you make these climate commitments and you really go for it, not only is it, you know, good for the environment, but also makes pretty, you know, good business sense as well. So, you know, so that's where we are today. We've got 30,000 megawatts of renewable energy generating around the world. And you know, that, you know, puts us at the kind of the forefront as a pioneer in this clean energy revolution. And then more particularly, what we've just recently committed to is in our own activities to be to be carbon neutral by 2030 in Europe. So that's another commitment, going even further than just cleaning up our generation portfolio. We're cleaning up all of our other day-to-day operations as well.
So as we unpack these commitments, the first thing I want to start with is financing. We have just wrapped up some research with Bloomberg Green and with our partners around corporate climate commitments. What are the barriers and catalysts? And we'll be launching this next month, so a lot more that we're excited to share with you. But just to preview that financing was really one of the things that topped the list. Questions around either getting the investment up front to invest in either the new technologies, the changes that are needed to be made here, or also proving the investment and the returns that you're going to get. So Richard, tell us about how at JLL you've gone through that process of getting, squaring the financing around this, the buy-in that you need and the return you're going to see.
It's a really, really important point, and it's totally different for every company. When I was putting together the plans for our for the financial assessment of our scope 1 and scope 2 emission reductions, which for us is essentially our buildings, and we have quite a very big white van engineering fleet in the US and in Europe as well specifically. And the plans we put in place and if you look at the pathways that we have in order to reduce scope 1 and scope 2, and move from EV, move into EV for our vehicles, and move into renewables, and move into operational efficiencies in each of those pathways, and then the final piece to REC, so RECs, where necessary, or their equivalent around the world. And at the end of the day, when we put those pathways together, the papers I took to the board were looking at, for every dollar we spent, we were getting a $1.50 return over the period to 2034. We're going into positive returns within 5 years, and we calculated we were going to receive a 16% IRR on the back of the investment we're making. So for us, it was a very positive piece to be doing. And I have to say, everybody's different. And I think because of the size of our fleet, we're particularly advantaged from having that vehicle fleet. And therefore, once you've moved into EV, the big difference between the cost of fossil fuel and EV and electric going into it is you're running about 10%. Even our calculations are on a 20% cost. And it was a relatively easy sell to our board, which then meant we were able to capitalize on that and invest in the services we were then able to offer to clients to do exactly the same.
So it's the opposite of the challenge that people often talk about. You know, it actually made the case for you to look at the financing around this, right? And I'm curious, Jonathan, if that's the same for you as you've seen this transition with Iberdrola's business. Talk to us about the investing and financing around it.
Yeah, again, I think our position's a bit different from some of the others on the panel, because really this has become our core business. So everything we now do as a company revolves around either producing clean electricity, transmitting and distributing that to market, or selling it to customers through digital solutions. And so financing those activities is the core of what we are there to do. That's why people invest in us in the first place. And we've invested tens of billions of euros over the past 2 decades in renewable energy infrastructure doing that. Only last month we announced we would be investing between now and 2025 75 billion euros in clean energy infrastructure. So we are really ramping up, as many are, as we move in this quest towards net zero. And what's really interesting to see is just how hungry the finance markets are to get involved. So, in April of this year, right in the middle of the pandemic, we placed 750 million euros worth of green bonds in Europe and $750 million worth of green bonds in the US. And in each case, we were 5-6 times oversubscribed. So there is a huge hunger, actually, for people to come and finance clean energy infrastructure, which is a great position to be in, given the scale of the challenge ahead of us in decarbonising the power sector.
Ellen, one of the things that I was struck with when you were describing HP's forest positive commitments and the circular economy models that you're working on are how many nonprofits you listed, how many partners you listed. So tell us about how you're collaborating with external stakeholders and the role they've played here.
Well, our vision is that printing with HP is going to protect forests regardless of what brand of paper our customers use. And so what that means is we have to work not only to change our products in our own company to be the most sustainable, but also the industry. So for us to do that, what we decided to do was create the HP Sustainable Forest Collaborative. It was clear that, we can't do what we need to do alone. The only way we're going to be able to do it is working with others. So last year, we announced a partnership with World Wildlife Fund with the support of the Forest Stewardship Council and International Paper that was really all about focusing on protecting and conserving 200,000 acres of forests, equivalent to the size of New York City. We picked 2 projects, one in Brazil and one in China. And then earlier this year, we've continued to expand that. So now Arbor Day Foundation, Chenming Paper, Domtar, New Leaf, some of the biggest players in the paper industry have now joined our HP Sustainable Forest Collaborative to accelerate these efforts and really focus on the forest restoration that we need. So, collaborating across industry, I think, demonstrates how we all need to be working, right? We know, again, these problems and what we're facing with climate change is so complicated. And again, the only way we're going to be able to do it is if we break down those barriers and those silos and figure out ways to go beyond our own things that we control and how we can influence and leverage working together.
Edgar, what Ellen said about we can't do what we need to do alone, I think it'd be a great tagline for the climate pledge. So tell us about why you all structured in that way. That's really, it's not something Amazon's doing alone. It's something that you're trying to do with partners across all industries.
Absolutely, and Ellen put it very much right, and everyone in the panel has said it. We all want to see this, achieve these goals, and we cannot do it alone. The climate pledge, as of yesterday, I think we made some announcements, and now we include 31 signatories of all kinds of organizations. Now we have Unilever, Verizon, Siemens, Microsoft, Best Buy, Uber, Infosys, Henkel, and others, many other great companies that are stepping up to the challenge, because these not only help us achieve the goals for the planet, but also help all stakeholders in the supply chain to know that this is coming and be able to also make the investments and make the same commitments and have this ripple effect. So collaboration, again, is paramount. And I think the climate pledge, we're very, very excited and proud of all the companies that have stepped up and signed to the challenge. The other part of the equation is that we have some ideas that we know we want to move forward fast. We know about renewable energy. Yesterday was some announcements of the investments we made on that area that made us the largest ever purchaser of renewable energy by investing a total of almost 6.5 gigawatts. But even the things we know, there's so many things we don't know. So part of our strategy also to foster that collaboration is to invest in new ventures. We have the Climate Pledge Fund. There's a $2 billion venture investment program just to back companies that not only help Amazon achieve the decarbonization goals, but also other companies. The first recipients of the fund, included Bedrock Materials that are looking at end of life of batteries for EVs and any other electronics. We have Carbon Cure that is just concrete that instead of creating emissions captures and sequesters emissions. We have Turntide Technologies, is motors that are just more energy efficiency. And again, the idea of all these investments is not only to invest on things that are directly help Amazon, but also help many other companies in the journey towards net zero carbon by 2040.
It's a lot of collaboration. And Richard, you had also mentioned another group to collaborate with here, which was your clients. Can you tell us more about how you're thinking about collaboration with JLL's clients as part of your climate commitments?
Yeah, our clients make up 95% of our footprint, where we're managing property on their behalf. So it actually gives us a great way of linking in with our clients, and actually it creates a means of dialogue. And working with our clients, it's just great for us, and actually it's something that we just need to be doing more of in order to get down. If we're going to hit, if we're going to be able to sign up to the likes of an Amazon pledge by 2040, we need those clients with us in order to be able to do that. This is not an offset position. We need to change behaviors, and the best way of changing behaviors is actually to prove the benefits of doing so. And if we're reducing the actual energy take, then it's actually saving money. That's as simple as saving carbon, of course it is. But if you're reducing your energy by half, by the technologies Amazon are looking at, or we're investing in an air conditioning motor that we're putting on buildings now, reducing the energy requirement by 50% through one of our venture funds. That means that it's not only less carbon, but it's also saving money as well. And that is a win-win. We need to look for that going forward. And it's a great way for us as a service company to have those discussions with our clients.
And Jonathan, for you all, I think a paramount piece here is scaling the technologies that you're working on, right? It's not just developing these solutions, but how do you put them at a scale that they can make a major change? So how are you approaching that?
Yeah, so I think probably, one thing that we've been arguing for more than 10 years is this concept of electrification and decarbonisation. So this realisation that the only way you're going to meet, your climate commitments and somehow meet energy demand is by electrifying the economy and decarbonising the electricity sector. And so what we've been working on for 20 years is how you decarbonise the electricity sector. And that's all about driving up scale. So we were one of the early players in the onshore wind space. That's now a huge part of the electricity market. We were one of the early players in the offshore wind space, and that's now become, I think, the backbone of the energy system in Europe going forward. So we've been there all the way through, trying to drive up the industrialization and make these, what were at the time quite niche technology ideas, into something mainstream. And the reason we had to do that is because, quite simply, if your electrification and decarbonisation plan only works if you can get the price of electricity down to a point which makes sense. And thankfully, that's what we've managed to do. Because of that scaling up, because of that technology advancement, renewable energy is now the cheapest way to produce electricity. And I think, to be totally honest with you, electrification and decarbonisation is the received strategy now. And I don't think that if we hadn't done what we had done in the industry to drive the price down, the politicians wouldn't be doing what they're doing right now and setting these net zero targets. So I think it's been a really important contributor to the whole climate movement, is this scaling up and innovating on renewable energy technology and showing an affordable pathway to decarbonisation.
On that note, Edgar, you just mentioned how Amazon has just announced that you became the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy. So tell us more about how you're thinking about Amazon's role in that scaling up around renewables.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good point. When we were doing our mapping of our journey, we have our science teams, mapping the carbon footprint, understanding exactly where the hotspot is, and energy, Scope 2 emissions are always one of those super important areas. So we took decisive action on how to truly move fast in investing in renewable energies. Again, we need to look at our whole portfolio as an organization. We have AWS data centers, we have fulfillment centers, we have whole food markets, stores. So with all those things, we definitely need to look at utility scale investments. Again, the announcement that we made yesterday, there were 26 additional utility scale wind and solar energy projects that we have invested around the world that is going to power all of our data centers, corporate offices, etc. And again, this is where we look at around the company, and we said we should join forces and truly move fast and unblock any potential business that may have been wanted to do this as a whole. And I think that's how we've been able to make in such a short time so much progress, leveraging our scale, and again, working backwards from our emissions, knowing this is an area we need to move much aggressively. I think that's probably one of the lessons here, is that in some areas we can pool as an organization and kind of centralize and really divert our resources. In other areas, we definitely need to rely more on individuals and their own business leaders. And for that, what we've done is the opposite, is kind of give them the tools for them to be able to make the decisions. I know we all talk about carbon footprint, but once you get to the details, it's hard for business leaders to grasp all the trade-offs. So we're trying to give that information and embed it in their every day-to-day decision. And that's how we landed into some of our Rivian electric vehicle investments, et cetera, for every business to find their own path, as well as pulling the resources together within the company.
So let's say you've made a great commitment, you've done all the background work that we've talked about here, you've gotten people on board, and something unforeseen, let's just say a global pandemic comes along and throws you off course. So Ellen, how do you prevent something like that from throwing off all the work that you've been doing, or all these commitments that you've been making?
Sure. Well, no excuses, right? I mean, that's the attitude we have with regard to our commitments. There are no excuses. And especially when you're thinking about serious issues like climate change, we are running out of time. There's no time to back away or to weaken, the action that we're taking. So a really interesting example of some of the challenges we faced regarding the pandemic revolved around our transition to a circular economy and using more recycled plastic in our products. We have a project in Haiti where we source ocean-bound plastic and upcycle it into things like HP print cartridges, into our PC products. And to date, we've used over 60 million bottles upcycled from ocean-bound plastic in our products. As part of our efforts to scale, we now have over 50 products that use this material. We had committed a year ago to building an ocean-bound plastic washing line in Haiti. So something we've never done before as part of doing things, in a more disruptive way and reinventing how our supply chain works. We were purchasing this recycling infrastructure equipment to put in Haiti. Well, the 10 containers of this washing line that we had custom built in Germany was shipped, arrived down in Haiti in February, and we had a 5-week installation period where the installers from Germany and Montreal were going to fly down to build it. Early March, all flights stopped, right? So our team, our installers couldn't get down there. So this was, a choice. We could back off and say, well, we've got excuses. We can't get an installation team down there. We can't build it. Let's just hold our plans. Let's divert. Let's change, what we're doing. And instead, what the team did was rethink, how could we do this? And what they ended up doing was pretty amazing. They built it virtually. So the install team stayed in Germany and in Montreal. We, like all of us are doing right now, set up Zoom meetings every day where those installation experts zoomed into Haiti. We hired a local team of technicians, certainly technicians that had never built anything quite like something of the complexity of this washing line, but reinventing how we work in this new virtual environment using technology, we were able to build that washing line. And we just held the ribbon cutting ceremony for it. It's up, it's running, and it's pretty amazing. But I think it comes back to determination, no excuses. The time is right now. We cannot wait, and just working across these obstacles. And again, I'm going to go back to collaboration. It took, this collaborative team of the supplier in Germany, our recycling experts of our first tier supplier in Montreal, our own engineers working together with the local technicians on the ground to figure out how to do that safely. So things are possible that you don't think are possible, even in this very unusual time.
I love this no excuses approach, Ellen. And Richard, how about you? Share with us that, you guys have made some major commitments this year despite COVID. So how have you been approaching getting over these barriers?
Well, I think COVID has just taught us all that what we were doing didn't work. And we all talk about building back better. But in my own business, in the real estate business, there is so much that 2/3 of our existing building stock will still be here in 2050. So it's not just a matter of building differently. Real estate is responsible for 40% of the world's carbon emissions. And that is not just operating buildings, and that's one piece. So that's the existing buildings. How can we retrofit those? And that's possible. The Empire State Building, we're working with the owners there. We've taken out 40% of the energy demand in the Empire State Building. All of the windows have been refitted using the existing glass, but we've done 90%, 96% of that is being renewed, not being replaced. With all the lifts, we've actually put brakes, the brakes in the lift, there were always brakes, but the brakes that have been put into the lift now are actually creating energy as they brake. So that is reducing the total energy requirement. Retrofit is going to be massive going forward, but equally on new build, circularity, and I 100% agree with Ellen, circularity, we're all talking about net zero, which I think leading up to COP26 is going to be massive, but circularity, the use of new materials, new building materials, new fit out, how we fit out our offices will be changing so that everything will become modular and reusable going forward.
Edgar, I'd love to direct you a question that we've gotten from the audience asking about the importance of environmental education. And I think let's expand this as well to also ask about the importance of younger generations who are stepping up, who are encouraging companies or their leaders or themselves to make major climate commitments. Tell us about what you think that's going to create for climate in the future.
Yes, so definitely there's a need to continue to invest on making this science available. But I think even the pandemic itself kind of shows the importance of this. I think Ellen said it. We had to make sure that our associates were safe, invest clearly in with our partners to continue to deliver our customers what they needed in the pandemic. But climate change doesn't stop because there's a pandemic. Climate change continues. This is something we need to continue to track down. So I think there's two fronts on this education. One is leading by example. despite all the growing challenges that we had as a company to be able to meet the growing demand, we did not slow down our journey on climate. So we really mean it. It's part of the business. It's not a one or an optional thing we do when we have time. Is our journey that we are going to continue to do. So on some way, just moving along despite all the obstacles, this is as important as anything else we do as a company. So I think that that's an important message that we need to give to a lot of people that are out there, generations. And of course, as we continue to invest in our climate funds, we're going to look for opportunities to disseminate and make this more accessible. We have partnership with small enterprises that help us to propagate our message. But absolutely, education on one end, leading by example, I think is also the other side of the equation that we should be driving forward.
And Jonathan, from your perspective, what do you see as Iberdrola's role in helping us to build back from this challenging year?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the pandemic was a really interesting exercise, I think, in showing people just how much an external or natural event can totally disrupt our way of lives, completely break down our social and economic systems, but also how adaptive we can be and how we can adjust our way of life quite quickly. And I think most people recognize that if that pandemic was a tidal wave, climate change is a tsunami, and it will have way longer lasting, much deeper effects than that pandemic has had. So the imperative to act, I think, has really been, thrown in front of us. From our part, I mean, I think what's interesting to know is just how the electricity sector almost managed to carry on without missing a step. We're an essential part of the economy, providing an essential service to hospitals and all the other frontline services. We had to find a way to safely carry on. And if you look not just in our own company, but across the piece, the big operating assets kept operating as they should have. So we really stepped up, I think, and delivered what was needed. And then looking forward, you've got this amazing marrying up of their climate requirements and the need to invest your way out of a global recession. And you bring those two together and you invest the tens of billions of euros that we're talking about in clean energy infrastructure, and you're managing to tick both boxes. So I think that, for the first time in our history, our economic interests and our climate interests are perfectly aligned in the short term. That hasn't been the case until now. And I think we really need to take advantage of that, and we will not look back from this point.
We're just a couple of weeks away from 2021 now. So I want to end by asking each of you, what do you think is the next step for your climate goal, and what's going to be happening in 2021? Ellen, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, again, we are so committed to action in this space. While setting, big goals is clearly important, and this decade, 2021 to 2030, is being termed the decisive decade, the UN decade of ecosystem restoration. We understand the urgency, but for us, it really is about action. So living into those commitments, turning out results, inspiring others across our industry, across other industries, and working together to collaborate, break down those barriers, and make big things happen, make big change happen. So we've got a whole host of commitments and actions that we're delivering every day. Things around the forest programs that I mentioned, our ocean-bound plastic programs, delivering towards a circular economy. Lots of work to do, and we're going to continue to take action.
Great. Jonathan, what about you? Next steps for 2021?
Well, I mentioned earlier on that we'd announced this 75 billion euro investment programme over the next 5 years. So over the past 20 years, we've grown ourselves to be the largest renewable energy player in the world. In the next 5 years, we're going to double our size. So, starting now, we're working onshore wind, solar energy, offshore wind, hydrogen schemes, battery schemes. We're investing in smart networks, digital solutions for customers to make all of that come true. So, the work will not stop for us in delivering that clean energy future.
Richard, what about you at JLL?
I think for us, net zero is the immediate issue as we build up to COP26 and the race to net zero. And it's not just a matter of having a target. We can all set targets. It's a matter of actually knowing what your data is. And this applies to all of us because we all have to be transparent and we have to be collaborative. None of us are going to do this on our own, find the right answers. But I think it is to actually have not just the target, but also to have the pathways to achieve it and the roadmap and the milestones to measure ourselves against as we do. Because I think we need the whole process, and all of us individually doing our own thing, but working collaboratively and in cooperation. Because, as I say, I don't think we're not going to achieve a 2050 or 2040 net zero goal if we all try to do our own thing.
And Edgar, the final word goes to you. Tell us what we can expect from Amazon's climate commitments in 2021.
Well, first, more companies joining the climate pledge. I think that we need to get more people excited, more people making these commitments, making these bold investments. So I invite all of them, and I think we're going to see much more of companies joining and us helping that journey. And we have made some big steps on energy, on electrification of fleets. But this is just the journey, the first step in the journey. We need to execute on them, track them, make sure we deliver them. So we're going to continue focusing on a few of those areas and looking what our Climate Pledge Fund discovers as we go in our journey.